It has been the most talked about app, certainly for the last 7 days. We are talking about the COVIDSafe app. But is it safe to download, and does it also work? To debate that, we have technology writer with the ABC Science Unit, Ariel Bogle, and technology writer and also the breakfast presenter at ABC Western Plains, Nic Healey, joining us. Before we get into the broader implications, though, let's just start with what's going on underneath the surface of this app. What does it actually do?
If you download the app on iPhone or Android, you'll then be asked to enter your name. You don't have to use your real one, your phone number, your postcode, and an age range. And based on that information, a encrypted ID will be registered with the government, but also it will begin to be an ID code that's kind of advertised from your phone. So if you come into range with another Bluetooth device, it will note that ID, your ID, and your phone will note their ID. And so that really allows this tracing of who you've been in contact with in Bluetooth range of over 21 days. So after 21 days, each time that data will be deleted from the phone. But if you test positive for COVID-19 and consent, a nurse or doctor might ask you to upload all those IDs you've collected on your phone and stored there into a system that will let them sort of trail through that, find out who your close contacts were, potentially for about 15 minutes or more, allowing them to reach out to those people, maybe asking them to get a test or quarantine, whatever else.
Nic, one of the first things that came up was this idea that, at least on an Apple device, you sort of have to have it on, or it has to be like running in the background. When it first launched, Nic, I think a lot of people were like, does that mean I have to have the app open all the time if I have an iPhone? That's not quite how it plays out, is it?
My understanding is, yeah, for some older models, you will have to have the app open and running. And for some older models, your screen unlocked as well for it to be effective.
Really?
Well, this is the problem. You can't just make an app like this for the latest and greatest phones. It has to be, if you need 40% of Australia to be downloading it and using it, it needs to be able to work across a huge range of models of varying age and varying kind of manufacturer. I don't know if they've accomplished that.
Singapore has a contact tracing app too called Trace Together, and that's the one that on which Australia's is largely built. They share a lot of the same code. And if you go to the iTunes store, for example, the App Store for Trace Together, it's littered with bad reviews, people saying, I can't take a call and have this app functioning at the same time. It really had some big problems on iPhone, and one reason for that is Apple actually blocks apps from having Bluetooth on all the time, exchanging information as a kind of privacy protection. It's often a good thing. And the Australian government claims to have done something to get around this issue, but they have declined so far to tell us how, and declined to share the source code so a lot of people can dig through the guts of this app and figure out how everything works. So I think that the government really owes the Australian people, who they're encouraging to download this app in great numbers, some point-by-point clarity, even down to phone model, about how to use this app so it works.
I feel like I'm reasonably aware of the privacy arguments around it, and of course just the broader technological arguments around it. And I think I sort of landed very quickly on its capacity to potentially do good outweighed its capacity to potentially do me harm. The question then, I suppose, sort of becomes like, Nic, what would it take for you to be confident in it? Are there things that the government or the app itself could do that would make you confident in in that it's a good decision?
Let's say I am diagnosed as COVID-19 positive. What does literally happen to my phone? Do I have to hand it over? Does that data then automatically find a way to be uploaded when we're told that it is being decentralized? Does someone have to then contact? I mean, we're talking about the handshake Bluetooth IDs are not supposed to be phone numbers. Do they then get unmasked? Do people get called? I just want a better idea of, after a positive diagnosis, how does that contact tracing work?
Ariel, what do you think's missing from the conversation?
So it's interesting too to talk about centralised versus decentralised. So that argument really relates to what happens after somebody tests positive and agrees to share their data. That goes to a central government server, and the government has introduced what's known as a determination under the Biosecurity Act. The Health Minister, Greg Hunt, did that, and that says that data in that central server can only be used by health professionals, only for the purposes of contact tracing. So that is some of the privacy protections people were looking for to make sure the app wouldn't be used, say, by law enforcement or Centrelink or whoever else. But at the same time, putting data all in one place is always a risk because it creates that honeypot effect. It only needs one point of failure for data to be exposed. And to be fair to the Australian government, a lot of other governments around the world have taken a similar approach or are on their way to do so. There are more decentralised options, however. Google and Apple are also building a contact tracing API that governments can use. And their model, as they've framed it, is slightly more decentralised, keeps more data out of the hands of government. So it's interesting the Australian government decided to roll its own app before using that Google and Apple option and chose to keep that data centralised. And they have said the data will be deleted at the end of the pandemic, but what the end of the pandemic means is anyone's guess.
All right. There is lots more of this in the podcast of Download This Show. You can find it wherever you podcast. We're also looking at how a country managed to lose their domain name. How do you do that? Listen to the podcast. Download the show wherever you get your podcasts.